So I have a question for you, Mr. Wearing Jeans to record a podcast.
Uh-huh.
Are you
So,
just one of those people that just like wears pants all the time?
yeah, right. It is pretty unusual for me to be wearing pants while podcasting. You're right.
Oh, it is unusual. So you do not wear pants all the time.
Of course not. Often it's just too much effort. It's too much effort to change.
Wow, that's deep.
It's a general metaphor for life.
Yeah. Can we work that into the show somehow?
Yeah,
I don't think
I think
so.
that's what this show is about.
Yeah, it's about how it's too much effort to change and you just shouldn't actually bother at all.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast dropping in on key moments of Mike Flanagan's life while screaming our crooked necks off. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me as always, coming at us live from the middle of his sleep paralysis, it's Matt Freeman. Matt, wave to the audience for me. Perfect. I couldn't decide whether that joke was like rude to people that actually suffer from this very real problem that is sleep paralysis or not, but I think it's okay. I think
I think it's fine. When has being rude ever stopped us, really?
that's true. We are rude constantly.
Yeah.
This week on the show, we continue our journey through Mike Flanagan's 10-part limited series, The Haunting of Hill House. We're up to the halfway point. Episode 5, The Bent Neck Lady. And this, Matt, this is a big one. We are zooming in on the final Crain child, Nell, as we witness her spiral over the last few years, all culminating in her death at the hands of Hill House. And then, Matt, the shocking reveal. The Bent Neck Lady, the ghost that has been haunting Nell for her entire life, is in fact Nell herself. Holy shit. This is the moment. This is it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty great twist. I think it's safe to say I didn't see this coming.
Oh, thank God. I was so worried for like literally the last month. I've been like, he's going to figure it out. He's going to figure it out. It's right there. You can actually see Victoria Pedretti is playing the Bent Neck Lady in most of the scenes that we see her in. And he's going to notice it. Please don't.
See, I didn't see that. I mean, I think that the clever thing the show does is it gives you just like a credible red herring, which is just like, okay, the Bent Neck Lady is a ghost that is haunting Nell, and the way that this evil ghost is going to kill Nell is by hanging Nell, the same way that the Bent Neck Lady ghost died, because that's kind of a thing that you can imagine a ghost doing, trying to kill you in the same way that it was killed.
Sure.
And I just that was the story I had in my head, and it didn't occur to me at all that, well, frankly, it didn't occur to me at all that there would be time travel. So,
Well, I mean, it's sort of time travel.
yeah, so we can talk about time travel later. You're right that there are ways to interpret it that are not time travel, but like what was going through my head the first time I saw the ending was like, oh, it's time travel. So, yeah, we'll get around to the time travel conversation.
Oh no, for sure. We will talk to that. I'm a little nervous here, Matt. This is a big episode. This is an important episode of the show. This is a turning point of the show. You know, you talked about Thea was kind of the hinge point of the 5 children, being the middle child. This episode is kind of the hinge point of the show, right? We have this structure established from the first episode carrying through this episode that we are going to be going through these children one by one. We're going to learn about their past, and we're going to see them in the present, in the day before and after Nell's death. And that's the structure. And this episode kind of eschews that structure a little bit. We see much more of Nell in both past and present and throughout her life. And of course, it all culminates in her death. And it's like, okay, we're at this really weird turning point where it's like, okay, cool. We did all that for 5 hours. Now what's the show?
Mm-hmm.
Because we had like after probably the second or third episode, we kind of got our legs under us, or we got the structure of the show generally. But now everything after this moment is going to be different. It's going to change. We've gone through the kids. We've gone through the one by one. We've gotten to this point, and now who knows? And I can say, like I told you after episode 1 that episode 1 was not the episode that made me fall in love with the show. It's this one. This is the episode that made me fall in love with the show. Like, obviously I was enjoying the show up until this point, and you can listen back to the last 4 episodes to hear how much I've been enjoying the show, especially on this rewatch. But on my first time through, it was the bent neck lady and the emotional, devastating resonance of that episode, and the culmination in that surprising twist, which, like you, I did not see coming until the moment it hit. That's when I said, "Oh, this is something special." So
Yeah.
it's not like Castle Rock, for example, which is a show that I thought was good with one great episode. This is a show that I think is great, but then this episode is the thing that kind of clues you in on its greatness if you're watching it like a normal person would, and not like we are.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. Or the whole show is great, and this is the the thing that cements it as something for the ages, something that would prompt a man to say, "Hey, we should start a Mike Flanagan podcast."
Yeah. Yeah, and I can confidently say we got a whole lot more coming too. Yeah, it's great. It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking to be here. I want to do this episode justice because I just think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Again, we're going to get to all this again, I think, in more detail. But I love that the thing about that ending is that, to me, it's such a hallmark of Mike Flanagan to have that combination of like fate's worse than death and ironic nightmares born of a character's worst fears and all of that just punching you in the gut and being executed so effectively. Just a stellar episode.
Definitely. All right. Before we dive into the episode in detail, we did just want to remind you folks about all of our various locations out there on the internet for news and to hear from us in between these episodes. So we are on Instagram at Doof Media. We're on Blue Sky, Flanagan's Wake Pod at Blue Sky. I don't know how that works. It's there.
Who knows?
We are on YouTube at Doof Media on YouTube. We are in the middle of fighting a copyright takedown on YouTube right now. Our very first episode on this show, Steven Sees a Ghost, was taken down by Netflix over the weekend. 2 weeks later, they decided to rip that one down. Obviously, we think we're covered under fair use and are going to fight that battle. But if you go there and can't see the episode, well, that's what's going on.
Yeah, these things happen with YouTube.
Oh yeah, it's constant. We discovered we had the problem very early on this show, and we thought we fixed it, and now it's gonna come back. But we really love the video, the add-on that the video makes to these. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, if you haven't checked out these particular episodes on YouTube, our editor Jason is doing a really great job of sprinkling in clips from the episodes to really highlight the things that we're focusing on and talking about, especially if we're talking about like performances, face acting and camera work. I think it really adds to the experience, I think. So check us out on YouTube.
That's
and then
right.
What's the last one, Matt? Where else?
The one other place is Reddit. Reddit.com/r/Doof Media is the place to hang out and discuss all things Doof Media, especially Flanagan's Wake. But really, there's always a lot of different threads discussing the various things we're talking about across our different shows. It's a cool place to hang out, so check that out.
Yeah, there was just a trailer for it, Welcome to Derry, and we had a special Kingslingers podcast on that last week, so that'd be a great place to talk about that as well. You can also email us if you just don't want to talk in the scary world of social media, which I totally understand. We are at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com. All right. Enough of this. Let's talk about the bent neck lady. Matt, this episode was written by Meredith Averill, and was directed, of course, by Mike Flanagan. I did there is a director's commentary for this episode on the Blu-ray, so I am going to kind of pick my favorite moments of learnings from Mike Flanagan as he talked about this episode. By the way, just before I say that, don't watch the director's commentary episodes until you've seen the entire show, because he does reference future events in those director's commentary. I think his kind of vision of them was that a person who has watched all 10 episodes and is then coming back to learn more about the show is going to listen to the director's commentary on these select episodes. So yeah, do it that way for sure. But I will bring some select things here. And I bring this up now because one of the things that I thought was great is he was talking about the reason why he directs all 10 episodes of this series is because he really, really wanted to direct this episode. And then it was like, well, I want to direct episode 1 because it's the first one. I want to direct episode 10 because it's the last one. I want to direct 5 because I'm just in love with this material and I really want to direct it. And then 6 is a technically challenging episode, which you'll see, Matt. And then so suddenly I'm directing 4. And it's like, well, I also kind of want to direct 9 because that's really important. And so suddenly I'm directing. So I might as well just direct all of them. And that's what he said. That's the anecdote he gave here, which is really funny because he said, my lesson here was don't ever do that again. Because directing in television is really challenging. It's different from directing film. There's no real prep time between episodes. So like once production starts, it just kind of goes. And the idea of having multiple directors is that the director for episode 5 can be prepping while episode 4 director is directing. But if you're directing all of them, you can't do that. And so he said he would never do it again. And then he did in Midnight Mass.
So he didn't learn his lesson.
Well, I just think I think it shows just how important Midnight Mass was to him, because he does in Bly Manor, he does not direct all the episodes. In House of Usher, he does not direct all the episodes. In Midnight Club, he does not direct all the episodes. So it's really just Hill House and then Midnight Mass that he's full-time director.
It's kind of funny because neither this show nor Midnight Mass would I have ever had the thought like, oh yeah, this show is clearly being made by a guy who's just frazzled and he's missing a stitch here and there. It's like, no, it if anything, I feel like the fact that it was directed by one person all the way through just gives it a real coherency of vision and vibe and tone that probably wouldn't quite be the case if, you can always subliminally tell, if not consciously tell, when an episode is directed by a different person. They just make subtly different choices, and every choice in direction and camera placement and shot choice just feels so Flanagan in this series. I feel like it really would be noticeable if any of these episodes were not him. Personally,
I agree. I mean, I don't think the series would be worse, but I think it would be different. And I think the consistency of direction means that you can rely on this consistency of vision in the show, where if you didn't have a different director, I think he says this in the commentary himself, when you have multiple directors, what you are therefore relying on to make a consistent tone and feeling through the episode is the actors, is the production set people, like is the locations, is the actors, is all these things. And it's like, it's not that those things can't build this sense of similarity in tone episode to episode, but like, I don't know, I understand the need to like not want to do that again, but I also understand why a director would really feel the need to like, I should do all of these myself.
I think the way I think about it is like the director dictates the personality of the camera. It's because it's a choice of where you're looking at things from, essentially. Where is this perspective? What is the nature of the perspective that we are watching this from? And seems important that be kind of consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like us everyday TV watchers don't even think often about the full freedom of, you can put the camera wherever you want. Like that's not entirely true because you're limited by like space and physics, but like essentially like you can block a scene however you want. You can put the camera wherever you want. You can put the actors wherever you want. You can build the set however you want. And these are all decisions that have to be made and have to play out to give the show its look and feel and all these things. So yeah, I mean, like in conclusion, director, pretty important role in the filmmaking process. Especially along with the DP for sure. Like the DP is the one like helping the camera do the things that the director wants the camera to do.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Enough of that. Matt. Nell Crain. I'm sorry. Eleanor Vance. Vance. As our episode revealed. A lot of things we learn. Like this is, I'm not even sure how to kind of where to start with this episode, because there's so many things that like are consistent with what we've seen in the last 4 episodes. This is obviously a zoom in on the Nell character as we were expecting. It is telling her story from essentially beginning to end. I think we're much more chronological in this episode than we have been in the other ones. There's still some cutting back and forth, some flashbacks to the past. But like in those episodes, it was almost like 50-50, right? We like spent 50% of the time in the present and then like 50% of the time in the past of the characters, either when they were children or some of the more recent past. This one, we're kind of all over the place. And I think that's intentional. Like we're doing a lot of things with the sense and the feeling of time throughout this episode to kind of emotionally prepare us for the fact that we're going to make a declarative statement on what time is and isn't in the final moments of this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it feels very much like the Haunting of Hill House novel in this way
Mhm.
where we see things happen. We're not quite entirely sure when they happened. A later thing will happen, and then it's like, oh wait, was that earlier than this? And it's it's meant to reflect the character's mental state. It's not just meant to be confusing for the sake of being avant garde. It's Nell is losing her grip on reality, much like
Yeah.
much like Eleanor in the novel, and we are participating in that. We're not only watching that happen, but we are feeling that happen in a way I don't know if I've ever seen in fiction. I forget which week it was that we asked the question of like portrayals of mental illness, but this might have been a more appropriate episode to attach that question to, because
Yeah.
the episode itself is bringing you along this journey, this descent that Nell is undergoing, and it's disorienting and sad and painful and just
This is such a sad episode, man. Like,
yeah.
like Nell's journey is so heartbreaking. I mean, that is like Flanagan really turns the screws with with this one. It is just like from beginning to end, her story is just so sad, and the fact that she gets like moments of happiness in it all just make it even worse.
Mhm.
Um, it's really expertly done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I found the beginning part hard to watch. I wonder if you even know what I mean by this, because I'm so
No.
susceptible to like cringe. But it's not cringe. It's like it was setting off my cringe detector, but it wasn't because it was cringe. It was because it's like, oh, I can't watch this person's. I can't watch this. And what it was like the meet cute,
Oh, okay.
the meet cute, and again, perhaps this isn't going to come across at all. I'm going to fail at communicating this, but like to me, it almost pushed the same button as like cringe, where it's like, oh, you're making me care about them, and I already know that you're going to use this to hurt me later.
Yeah.
And so like even when the meet cute was happening and we're getting to know Arthur, I'm just like, oh, like that same sensation where I'm just like, I want to turn it off. I want to pause it, and like nothing bad's happening. Nothing. It's actually happy, but because I know somehow, I don't know how exactly, but I know you're going to totally screw me over with this.
Yeah.
I found it difficult.
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's like any kind of like accelerated love story in a piece of fiction, like we all make the Up comparison
Mhm.
of like the 15-minute opening scene of Up to make you fall in love with these characters and then smash your heart to bits. But like essentially that is what the opening of this episode is. I mean, we get the two instances of Nell as a child, the one when the bent neck lady first appears, and then we go back to the scene we saw in the original episode, where she's sleeping on the couch and the bent neck lady is hanging over her head. This time we hear her say, "No, no, 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 no," which in context like is just absolutely destroying.
Yeah.
Um, but then yeah, we move into this scene, and like what the episode understands, I think this is so important, is that like we have to see Nell as this like terrified, borderline frantic, mentally unwell person, but we also like have to see her like happy.
Yeah.
Like and like a part of that happiness is Arthur Vance. And we have to establish and make everyone buy into this relationship and fall in love with it right away. And part of that is the adorableness of the meet cute that I think you're bouncing off of a little there. I thought the I mean part of it, maybe part of your cringe detector, is that it's like it is a moment of social embarrassment where she misinterprets his question about coffee, that is just kind of charmingly adorable in that they both handle it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
It's like the the show understands that for all the stuff to work the way it works, you have to believe in their love story. And I think they pull it off in just a handful of scenes. They really do.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. That was that specific element of cringe was like, oh, this is like an awkward, but then they smoothed it over. And I will say, for all that I am making it sound like I was resistant to it, it's like I was resistant to it because I knew you were going to hurt me with it,
Yeah.
but it still worked on me. Like I
Yeah.
was unsuccessfully resistant to it. I was totally bought into this romance, and you want to see Nell happy. You see her as this tragic character from the very beginning. Um, she's not going to get out of this, but you wonder, like, well, maybe what what led her here. It's kind of interesting. This is going to be a little bit out of order, I guess, but like, I I almost wanted the answer to be like, oh, Arthur turned out to be terrible and left her, or something like that, because like that would actually be less just straightforwardly sad
Yeah.
than he just died pointlessly and leaving her totally bereft, and her
Yeah.
family, since they're all pieces of shit, were totally unable to like support her in any way, and she deteriorated from there. Like it would have been less painful if Arthur was a bad guy, right?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it is like he is the only person that listens to her, right? That is her thing. Nobody listens to me, nobody believes me. And we establish him right away in this, patient technician um relationship as listening to her. Like
Yeah,
he is listening to her problems, he is listening to her talk about them, and he is offering solutions, and he's offering explanations. And like obviously the relationship moves from there, but that is the establishing moment of the relationship, and this is the thing that Nell just has never gotten, is a
yeah,
person just to sit there and listen to her and believe her. um and he just does it, and that's why, like, I love that we get the scene, the scene of her waking up from sleep paralysis, and he coaches her out of it. It makes a great contradiction to the scene where that scene, the thing, it plays out exactly in the same way, except he falls over and dies. So it's a good establishing moment, but it's also a good establishing moment of like, she's not like magically cured because she met this guy. Yes, she stopped seeing the bent neck lady in that 2 year period, but like it's not like the sleep paralysis, the disorder that she's suffering from goes away. No, it's just like she has a person now that is going to be there for her and coach her through it and help her through it. And then the world, the house, if you want to believe Nell, takes that away from her. And
yeah,
she loses that and has nothing else. And the episode is essentially her desperately reaching out to every single member of her family, just trying to get help and trying to get them to listen to her. And nobody does. Nobody does. Like, we leave this episode going, man, like, this could probably actually have been prevented. I don't want to be too hard on the other kids because they also have their own shit going on, but I think you're right. Like they are assholes to her. They are dismissive assholes to her, every single one of them. And part of it I think is just like we talked about Theo as the middle child. Part of it is just she's the baby. And even though her and Luke are technically the same age, everyone treats Nell as the baby of the
yeah,
family. And there is a certain attitude you have towards the baby of the family that I think we see represented in how everyone deals with her.
yeah. There's a lot of great stuff in there we could talk about, but I think this is one major theme of the episode is the idea that nobody listens to Nell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this. I know. So I think not only is she the baby. You said, well, Luke is also the baby, right? It's like, well, Nell is a woman, and this is the thing that we do in
Yes.
our culture, in our
Yes.
society, and whatever, where men will talk over women. This like I don't know when I started noticing this, but at some point in the last few years, I started noticing consciously how often men will just talk over women in social situations. And when you notice it, it becomes like a splinter in your mind because you notice that men don't really talk over each other and
Mm-hmm.
women don't really talk over each other, but men talk over women all the time. And they're not even they don't even know they're doing it,
Yeah.
and I probably do it sometimes. It's a weird like I don't know what it is. It became really Yeah. Anyway, the reason I mention this is number one, like it's not just that Nell's a woman; it's also that Nell is like the baby, and she's kind of taken on she's kind of taken onto herself the persona of like nobody listens to me, so why bother? So she just kind of turns inward, and
Yeah.
in this regard, it makes it worse because I think like by expecting to not be listened to, by expecting to be stepped on and disregarded, you become your own worst enemy. You kind of become the person who is not listened to because you're unconfident, you're not projecting. One thing I know some women who, when people try to talk over them, they just keep the women just keep right on talking at exactly the same volume, and they just finish their thought, and it really throws people off. And then the man's like, "Oh, I talked over her," and then but like that's not something that Nell would do, right? So I don't know. I may be like over projecting this weird thing, but like it's definitely an important thing with Nell's character that isn't shared by the other characters is this element of not being taken seriously, not being listened to.
Yeah, for sure. I like what you said a lot about how like it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy where once you feel like people are not listening to you, you change your behavior. In one way or another, you assert yourself more or you collapse inside of yourself. And I do think that's Nell. And like if we look back at the last 4 episodes, one thing we absolutely see about Nell is in a lot of the scenes she's in, she's very quiet and she
Mhm.
doesn't say a lot. Like you think of the scene with Luke going into rehab, the only thing she's talking about is the horses and they have horseback riding. She's not really involved in the conversation very much. You think of the scene where Steve sits them all down and offers them a cut of his money. Nell clearly feels a way, like she feels a way about this, and we get to see in this episode the way she feels about this, but she feels like she doesn't have a place to speak her mind about it, or rather, if I do, nobody will listen to me anyway.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this like cycle of this, and that's what we're seeing, and eventually it blows up in her where she just later in this episode she feels like she just can't stand it anymore, and she's screaming and screaming for help and no one's listening, and so the only way she knows how to get people's attention is to attack them, and that's what she does to Theo. She attacks Theo, she attacks Steve, and she's kind of, the thing that I love about this is she's right about everything she says about Theo and Steve. She's just 100% correct
Yeah.
about them, but of course that doesn't have the effect either, because that just pisses them off and makes them dismiss her even more.
Yeah.
And that is the Nell that is so hopeless and lost that her only recourse is to go back to the house and try to confront
Right.
their issue that she has.
Which I think ties the ending ties directly to this conversation we're having right now. And I was thinking about this, setting aside like whatever conversation about time travel that we may have. I'm like, okay, what are we saying with this, right? Like, what is the metaphor of? Oh, it turns out that the entity that was haunting Nell was Nell. So, like
Mhm.
one straightforward interpretation of that, or okay, I don't know if it's straightforward. One interpretation of that is, she's her own worst enemy. It's actually her own nature and her own choices that are the thing that is haunting her throughout her life. Like you could say, and this is kind of a cynical and probably almost certainly unfair take. It's like, well, Nell, your lack of belief in yourself, your willingness to be stepped on in some sense is what led you to this situation because you didn't believe
Mhm.
yourself. The only person who believed you was Arthur. And the fact is, he didn't even, and this is maybe a little harsh on Arthur, but he didn't even really believe you. What he did was he said, "Oh, yeah, I recognize that. That's sleep paralysis. You
Yeah.
just have a fairly common medical condition. You have sleep paralysis. No big deal." She was super relieved to be told that, obviously, because she's like, "Oh my God, I thought I was crazy or haunted. And you're telling me I just have like a sleep disorder. That's a real load off." But maybe on some level, especially given her, crazy childhood experiences, should have had this feeling of like that's not quite right. That's not quite the right answer. And then the ending of her going back into the house is basically now no one is listening to Nell, including Nell. Nell is not listening to herself because she knows better than to go back to the house. And so the house has taken away everything from her because she doesn't even trust herself anymore. And that's her destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that interpretation a lot. I think it's a really interesting dynamic that we've set up here, though, with this idea that, like, on the one hand, nobody's listening to Nell and nobody's believing Nell, and, like, on the other hand, speaking of her psychiatrist, Dr. Montague, like, if a patient comes to you with this fixation on this evil haunted house they grew up in and tells you they're being haunted by this ghost that they see everywhere, like, you would probably do what he did, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is this really interesting scenario that's been built here in the show, and we've talked about this with Flanagan before, and like in Oculus and other things. Like, you have all these professionals that are reacting in the absolute correct way to someone telling you about these experiences they've had. But in this world that we've created, it just so happens that those patients are 100% correct about everything.
Yeah.
And here it is again here, and it's like it just it puts you in the situation where you just kind of don't know what to do in that situation. Like, I try to put myself in the shoes of like Steve or Theo or Shirley, and imagine what would happen if my little sister started coming to me talking about all these things. And it's really, if I'm being entirely honest with myself, it's really hard not to just do what they did, which
Yeah.
is be like, "Are you sure you're taking your medication?
Mhm.
It kind of seems like you're off your meds now. Like, I know you have mental health issues, and I know you're medicating for those issues, and now you're talking to me about this stuff again. Are you sure something isn't wrong with
Right.
you?" And like, that feels mean and dismissive because we are from the perspective of Nell, who we know for a fact that she's right about all this stuff. But like,
Yeah.
I just think it's a really interesting and complicated place to put us as the viewer
Yeah.
absorbing all this stuff.
Yeah, we continue this idea where the character whose episode it is, we are firmly placed in their head, 100% protagonist goggles. And even I think maybe the one exception is in this episode is when Theo comes over to her apartment. That was one moment where I was like, okay, Theo didn't do anything wrong here.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, everyone else comes off looking like a jerk. I will say, I thought
Well, okay. I think Theo was absolutely correct in the fact that her sister manipulated her to fly all the way across the country just to touch a pillow and tell her if her husband is there. I think Theo was absolutely right in her anger and rejection of that idea. But I also think Theo is like, "What's this quack doctor doing for you?" And she just like, it's all about, to everyone in her family, it's all about her meds. What meds does he have you on? Are you off your meds? That's all everyone wants to ask her, and they're not listening to the things she's saying. And I
Mhm.
think Theo is part of that. Even though Theo, I think, is righteous in her anger and indignation at being used in this way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think she's not perfect either.
I think part of what we want to see happen, and I've never quite articulated this yet, although I think I've maybe felt this way almost the whole time, is like what you want to see happen is you want to see these kids and their dad, frankly, sit down and have a goddamn conversation
Yeah,
and be like, what did you see? What did you see? This is what I saw. This is what I heard. This is what I think happened that night. And turn it from this lurid tabloid story or whatever version is in Steve's book, figure out what everyone actually thinks happened, because there's definitely going to be things. There's definitely going to be something fruitful come out of just having an honest and earnest conversation between themselves. But they're also on the defensive about the whole matter, that they're just not capable of it. And I think the
yeah,
house doesn't want them to, right? Like the house, I'm going to continue to sort of personify the house. I think that the last thing the house wants is these kids getting together and forming a plan. If I have any ideas about what the second half of the movie is, it's like the surviving kids are like, I don't know if they have this conversation that I'm imagining, but there has to be some sense of like, okay, something fucky is going on. Let's take some kind of action. And maybe
yeah,
they all still die horribly, but I kind of don't feel like it's just going to be like them being picked off one by one.
sure.
Could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation you're talking about, the thing that needs to happen, like, that is all Hugh, right? Like
Mhm.
I think we are kind of led to believe that Nellie and Luke probably like shared a lot of the experiences, and the thing we saw, like the thing we learned in this episode is the last night that Luke and Nellie and Abigail were in the red room with mommy having tea,
Mhm.
is what we're told. And Shirley is kind of indignant, or I think that was Shirley that was kind of indignant. What are you talking about? The red room's locked. What do you mean? And so it seems like the kids have shared their interpretation of it, and of course Steve and Shirley to a certain extent have dismissed those ideas as ludicrous and crazy and nonsense. But yeah, the missing piece we have here is the father, the parental figure in the household, coming together and talking to them about what happened. And we know for a fact that he hasn't done that. We know for a fact that he's never told Steve. I think that the image that I love so much in this episode, which is a new thing in this episode, is the conversation that Hugh has with Nell after he's come back from the house covered in blood. Um, and the police come to take him away, and he has this conversation with her and gives her this pocket watch, and basically says, "I'll come back at 2 o'clock." And he taps the watch 2 times. "I'll be back." And that here, 26 years later, she's still holding on to the watch. Right?
Mhm.
He's like, "Hold my watch for me. I'll be back to get it in just a few hours." And he's never collected it. He's never come back and get it. Essentially saying Hugh has never come back to Nell in a way that she wanted him to.
Yeah.
Never. And so that is the father seems to be like, not that there's not a lot of inter-sibling problems, there certainly are, but like the father is like ultimately the arbiter of all that, and
Yeah.
the responsibility of all that, at least as children, but they didn't get any of that.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think the only reason I didn't mention him in my first thought was like it's almost it's almost too easy because he can just tell them what happened. But maybe that's just what needs to happen. I mean, they clearly just don't know. Like none of them saw, right? Just the fact that he goes to the house and then comes back covered in blood means that like something additional happened that none of
Yeah.
them saw and none of them have any awareness of. So
Yeah.
um
Well, I mean, what we know is that the Nellie and Luke were with mommy in the red room. Nellie says that wasn't mommy.
mhm,
We know Steve sees her in those brief moments when his dad picks him up and rushes him out of the room. He sees her like dancing or
yeah, looking
be,
demonic.
yeah, just uncomfortably weird. And I don't know if he's shared with his siblings that he saw that. I think that would not fit in his narrative of um, nothing weird happened and it's
Yeah.
all in your head, and it was just our mom was crazy and she killed herself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like we're learning little bits and pieces, and I think we get like the most bits of what happened that night in this week's episode, but still very little. And yeah, like these were kids. Even the oldest one was still kid. They need a parent to help them process
Right.
what happened here. Like, I'm not even necessarily saying Hugh has to sit down and walk them beat by beat through what actually happened in this house, but like he's not there. He's gone. Like,
Yeah.
he loses custody of them, and we don't see him with his kids. And like I thought one of the interesting revelations of the wedding scene, which is a scene that we've returned to in every single episode of the show so far, of Nell's wedding. In this episode, we learned that Hugh was there, which is the
Yeah.
first time in 4 episodes we've seen that. Oh, her dad was at her
Yeah.
wedding. It didn't seem like he played an active role in it, because we don't even see him say anything. He doesn't even have a conversation with Nell in the scenes we see of this wedding.
Yeah.
He's just kind of standing there, and then the ghost of his wife is creepily standing over his shoulder. I thought that was great. It's like, oh, Hugh was here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. It's really interesting. I was thinking about this wedding scene because this is a moment we've returned to multiple
Yeah.
times. We returned to it with Shirley's episode and then this episode. We've referenced it in other episodes where we didn't necessarily see it. And I think we commented before that it was important for us to see the siblings just being siblings.
Yes. Yes.
Like they maybe the reason why this wedding is such an important moment is this was the last time they were all happy and they were all together. Um,
Steve is so kind to his sister.
Yeah.
in that sequence. I really think that's a huge. First of all, it's very funny. Him and Nell kind of drunkenly watching Shirley figure out that Theo is gay
Yeah.
is a delight. And yeah, it is. I think that the show fully recognizes that we do need to believe that these are siblings. Like obviously they have a lot of very charged stuff between them, but seeing them just be siblings, yeah, like you said, is important. One thing about that scene that I also didn't notice until a rewatch, that whole sequence, I don't know about the whole wedding sequence in general, but when Steve and Nell are talking to each other, in both instances, I think when they're talking to each other laughing at Shirley, and then when they're dancing and talking to each other about her moving out to LA and all that stuff, and then she sees Liv, that's all filmed in handheld. It's which is not something that is done very often in the show. So it is, what I mean by that, if you don't know, like it's not like, this is not a tracking shot on a dolly or on a tripod or anything. This is just a guy with a camera on their shoulder, or I guess I don't know if cameras are that big anymore. So it could just be a guy holding a camera. The point is, the camera moves differently. It's more shaky. It's less steady. It feels kind of home movie-ish in this regard.
Yeah.
And a thing I noticed on rewatch, when Nell confronts Steve in the bookstore near the end of the episode, when Steve pulls her aside after that confrontation and is chastising her about that, that is also shot in handheld.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really interesting, I think, comparison point in the show that both of these sequences in which Nell and Steve are having a private conversation are shot in a similar style. One of them is Steve being warm and caring and all the older brother stuff you would expect him to see. The other, he is just being so mean to her and so dismissive.
Aren't they dancing in the wedding scene?
They are, yeah.
So
yeah.
So I think one thing is like the angles on which you're seeing them are kind of either similar or like flipped, perhaps. Meaning the angles that they're standing relative to each other and relative to the camera, and it kind of it's like in the one they're physically close together, but it's because they're dancing. They're siblings. They're dancing. They're having a great time. And the other one, there's this sense of like aggression and anger. And Steve doesn't lay his hands on her, but he's very in her space because he's trying to keep it quiet because the fans are all around. But it's actually scary. I feel like the way the camera is positioned reminds you of how small Nell is and how big he is. And I don't think Steve is consciously trying to be physically threatening. I don't think he's the kind of guy who would want his sister to be afraid of him.
No.
But you can see how she would feel that way in that moment. And so it's like the opposite vibe. I agree. And that makes it even sadder. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing he repeats 2 times in that scene is not the time or place. He says that to her twice. And it's like, well, here's the problem, Steve. There's never a time and place. Like we even see that when he calls her a little bit later, she doesn't answer, right?
Yeah.
There's never a time and place. There's never a time and place to talk about this. I also love it in that scene, what he says when she's complaining about the book. What he says is, "You've had 6 years to file a complaint."
Mm-hmm.
Just the way, like, I don't know if he means in that way, if what he's saying in that is that like he literally expected her to like formally file a complaint. But even if he just meant you had 6 years to come and talk to me about it, the fact that he phrases it that way is just, it's perfect, Steve. It's so like formalized, and just he has not absorbed at all, or perhaps he has not let himself absorb her point, which again, as we said before, she's 100% right here. He made fun of her and like gaslit her that everything she was saying was ridiculous and crazy. And then he turned around and he wrote that in a book and made shit tons of money off of it. Like I don't think we've like, obviously we understood the way all the characters were angry about this and how this choice to publish this story has sent a rift through the family. But like, I don't think I had fully emotionally processed what that must have been like for like a person like Nell. Like, cause Shirley's mad about it for an entirely different reason for why Nell's mad about it.
Yeah.
Nell's mad about it is because like, you constantly call me crazy. You constantly tell me I'm nuts. You never believe me about any of this stuff. And then you took all these things I told you and you wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
And like when Victoria Pedretti, holy shit, man, she's so good in this episode. And you made so much money. Like the way she gives that line read is just perfect, and it doesn't seem like Steve processes any of
No.
it. Like,
No, well, yeah, it would be too much guilt for him to handle
yeah,
if he were to actually face up to it. So he just has to refuse to acknowledge or see the point that everyone's making. He offered them their cut, Scott. He offered them their cut. What's a man supposed to do?
yeah, yeah. Man, our boy Steve is just not looking good, man. These 5 episodes, or the 4 episodes following his, have not
Yeah.
been kind to him.
And yet, like, I think we can all relate to the idea of like, our career is failing, our life sucks, everything is going wrong. Here's an idea. Let me try this. Oh, I accidentally made a ton of money in a way that embarrasses my family.
Yeah.
Really hard to not do that, I think. I mean, we all like to imagine that we wouldn't do something like that, but like who's ever in such a position?
Well, and in a scene that ends with like us hating him, it begins with him ready to talk about his new book, his exciting new book, and he's got all these new stories in here. And there were so many cool stories in here, he couldn't even fit it in this book. And then all anyone wants to ask him about is Hill House.
Yeah.
It's like they don't care. Like they'll buy the new books, but they don't care.
Right.
What they're really into this guy for is this story. They don't care about his writing. It's these stories that aren't even his stories.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking, as like you're a failed writer who can't get anything published. You finally relent and tell the one story that has your name to it, and people love it, and it should be this moment of like confidence boosting, and it's like, oh yeah, you are a good writer. And it's like, no, actually, like you're just pumping out these other books that you don't believe in and no one gives a shit about.
Right. The one story that you did write, it's not even really your story.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I think that's gotta hurt for a writer to know that, like, I didn't, it's not my story. That's just, I just wrote it down.
Yeah.
Another character whose motivations I think I can definitely understand, or who we've not talked about much, is Hugh, because, yes, I think he is going to end up having to tell the kids this story. I think, just to connect a couple of things I said a second ago, I think by doing this thing where we've been seeing the night of the mother's suicide in snippets, it's like the show is building us up to the idea of like, at some point we're going to see what happened, right? Like it would feel, I would feel kind of cheated if we just never saw like, okay, here's what really happened, right? Like that seems like the kind of thing you save for like a big impactful episode. And that probably will be done when, this is the cliche way to do it, I guess, is to have the character be like, have Hugh be like, all right, fine, here's what happened. Lost whooshing sound, smash cut. But point being, like, if something upsetting happens or traumatizing, you do want to shield your kids from it.
Yeah.
Generally, like, or you want to tell them a version of it that's palatable, and you don't necessarily need them to know every terrible thing that is happening around them. And I can totally empathize with this. I can totally empathize with Hugh Crain seeing a bunch of utterly insane stuff and going through a horrifying ordeal, like unimaginably horrifying. Like if our assumptions are correct, and it's like his wife went insane and killed herself, and possibly he saw other supernatural things, we're not sure, he would just, putting myself in his shoes, I have no idea what I would say to kids in that situation. I would, I think honestly, just shutting up about it is not a bad idea. When they get older, do you have a responsibility to sit down with them, at a certain age and say, okay, look, here's what happened? You probably do, but I also can like understand him just being too still traumatized about it to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, one thing we could definitely say is I think Henry Thomas does like a fantastic job of playing an absolutely shell shocked, horrified Hugh Crain
Yeah.
coming back covered in blood,
Yeah.
doesn't even know what to say, doesn't even know where to begin talking about any of this. And yeah, we have been party to the conversations he's had with I guess it was his lawyer about like what is the correct thing to say. Like he panicked and told the tabloids a story, almost immediately regretted it, and then kind of buttoned down and refused to say anything, and that cost him his family, right? Like he loses custody of his children,
Yeah.
um, and then has kept tight-lipped on it since, we're told. So yeah, I mean, like I think we haven't gotten the show from Hugh's perspective yet, and maybe we'll, maybe we won't. Like we technically still have two more members of the the Power of Seven and the Crain family that we could have focus in on episodes on. I don't know. I mean, I do know, but for the
Right.
purposes of this conversation, I don't know. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, I think you have to squint a little bit harder to empathize with Hugh's position, but I think that is there for sure. Especially as parents, I think we can do that. It's such a fucked up situation all the way around, and that's what like with Nell, it's just like there is like through the construction of the Bentneck lady, there's an inevitability to Nell's death, right? Like she's been haunted by her death since she was 6 years old,
Yeah.
and that certainly has this feeling of inescapable inevitability. That's like
Mhm.
this is the way it was always going to happen. This is the way it was always going to go. Like you at the same time just want Steve or Shirley or Theo or fuck even Luke to like reach out to her and listen to her and try to help her and not just push her onto her shrink or push her onto her pills or dismiss her. You want these things to happen, but there's this certain feeling, even if you don't know that she's the Bentneck lady yet, there's the certain feeling that things are playing out the way they have to. And I think Flanagan creates that by positioning this episode at this point in the series, right? Like we are learning all these things about Nell after we already know that she's dead. We already know. So no, we don't know that Nell is the Bentneck lady at the beginning of the episode and that this all was inevitable. But we do know it was all inevitable because we've watched the previous 4 episodes in which she's dead already. And so he creates that feeling for us without letting us in on that secret.
Yeah.
Um, and it just makes it so sad. And it's like, what can you do? What can you do in these situations? Like
Mhm.
sometimes like life hands you these situations that are just like, how are people supposed to deal with this? Like it's very easy for us to sit here and be like, Shirley should have done this, Theo should have done this, Nell should have done this. But like in the moment of those situations, what do you do? Like I actually love it with where Theo is chastising Nell for buying the heroin for Luke, which I want to talk about that Luke scene. We'll get there, but like Theo is like this, like that's not the way you deal with an addict, and it's like yeah, like objectively true, bad choice, Nell, right? But also in the moment, you're in the car with your brother, the person you feel closest to. He's telling you all these things. He's telling you he believes in you. You're not doing well. You're looking for emotional support. And he asks you to do this thing for him. He's pleading with you to do this thing for him. And it's like, who among us like wouldn't fold under that kind of pressure?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the way that scene is framed makes it understandable, if not, like laudable. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's return to the car scene in a second. First, I just wanted to say I don't know if I've quite thought this word in context of this show, but the word is fate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where it's like one of the fun kind of things you do with the time travel trope is you comment on fate, the idea that this had to be this way, there was no way to escape this, and it makes it makes the house a very scary monster
Yeah.
to associate it with fate. Like for me personally, the scariest monsters are usually either magically tied to fate or in a more science fiction context might be precogs or people with certain time travel abilities. Basically, the point being inescapable doom, inescapable fate is scary in an oppressive and constricting way that I find personally upsetting. and it makes the house feel scarier to me. This idea that the house always knew, because that's what I could just say what I was gonna say about the time travel thing. Is like it could be time travel, or it could just be the house always knew what was gonna happen, not
Mhm.
because of time travel. It just knew because
Yeah.
it's an evil house and it knows, and so it just showed little Nell visions of her future self because it knew what was going to happen, and it shows
Yeah.
dying Nell visions of her past self. None of that requires time travel.
Yeah.
um
Well, I mean, I think one thing we can say is we know that the Crane women have ESP type
mhm,
abilities, right? We know Shirley uh, has some dreaming stuff that she does. We know, of course, Theo is the most straightforward and obvious, but we don't know what little Nell's power is, and it seems like we could say this is she has a certain level of premonition, right? That
mhm,
she is seeing things that have not yet come to pass, and
mm,
she's haunted by this premonition of her own the moment of her own death.
mm,
Um, and I think that checks out because like one thing she also sees is an image of Luke like on the floor. His mouth is foaming. He looks like he's ODing. We don't
yeah,
know, but he looks like he's ODing. And that is we learned that is the reason why when she called um, Steve, I think it was, and said she was worried about Luke. We didn't know where this worry about Luke came from at the time, and that's ultimately where it came from. And so, yeah, I mean, I like this idea of like this is her version of what Liv gave her and how it's just haunting her entire life. But I do like, yeah, the concept of fate and inevitability that the house allows her as a ghost to go back and witness these moments and that moment of realization, that moment of horror as the dying or dead Nell realizes what that thing that scared her entire life was is just mean. It's just really mean.
yeah,
It's like um absentia level of mean.
yeah. I was thinking, there he is. There's my Mike Flanagan with his fate's worse than death, and
Yeah.
just really twisting the knife. And it make not just Mike being mean, but the house being mean, right? The
Oh
the
yeah.
house kills her husband in this cruel, awful way.
So
Just so
do you just believe that like that she's correct there?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, I my interpretation of the show is that the house is a real evil entity. Like if we later find out that all the characters are just mentally ill, I would I would I mean that would be really interesting, honestly. Like that would be a really interesting ending for this show. Is like, no, actually, all of the Crane children just inherited their mom's mental illness, and there's no supernatural. Like that's which is close to what the books did, really, where
Yeah.
the book leaves you with not saying that's the case, but leaving open the possibility that that's the case. That Nell is just mentally ill. That nothing supernatural happened here, which contradicts what Shirley Jackson said. But death of the author.
Yeah. I mean, it would be weird to do that in a show where you like it so insistent on putting ghosts in the corner of every single frame.
Yeah, well, sometimes the house has ghosts all over the place, but it's
Sure.
unrelated to the house being evil.
Yeah.
Um, I kept thinking to paraphrase Sam Jackson, it's just an evil fucking house. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems like it, right?
yeah, I think so. Let's go back to the heroin car.
Oh my god. Oh my god, Luke, my boy. Like remember last week? Remember last week when we had this brief moment of like being super sympathetic to our poor Luke suffering from the disease that is addiction?
Yeah,
And then this sequence you're like, "Dude, come the fuck on."
yeah. Well, it's
Like,
critical. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, he's not even listening to her. Like, Luke, you are the one that no one listens to and no one believes, and then your sister is like telling you that she's not doing good,
Yeah,
and you're not even listening.
yeah. It really sucks. The critical thing about the last episode is that we didn't see Luke high. We saw him being strong. We saw him,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, Yes, this is what we want to see. We want to see him conquering his addiction. No one else appreciates how strong Luke is. Look how hard he's trying.
Yeah.
And then this episode, he's jonesing out of his mind, and he doesn't even look like himself. He's like sweating, and the performance is fantastic. I can't even do
Yeah.
it, but he's like doing this thing with his face and like his eyes, where it's like he's not even seeing what's around him. It's like he's not even seeing Nell. It's like he's just, I just see a thing that might get me heroin. That's all I
Yeah.
see in front of me right now.
Yeah.
And it's so, it's upsetting to us. It's obviously upsetting to Nell. It's upsetting to us just because we like Luke now, and so this sucks to see.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, once he starts shooting, like the instant he shoots up, the instant the needle enters his flesh, is when Nell sees the bent neck lady, which to
Yep.
me harkened back to this thing where they feel what the other is feeling, and the idea that that this horrifying apparition would be associated with him injecting himself with heroin is a really interesting idea to me.
Yeah, I agree. I thought about that too in that moment, especially coming off of last week's episode and our conversation around that. And like I don't know like what to do with it and where to put it, but like we definitely do so much work to establish the way they feel when each of them is suffering, right? Like when he is getting clean, she feels the withdrawal symptoms. Um, you know, so that the thing that the show has never said is like, therefore, when he is high, she is feeling some version of his high.
Mhm.
And like we said last week, the vice versa of it. Like she's this little girl, this terrified little girl who has been haunted by, it turns out, herself her entire life, and like maybe his addiction is ultimately like driven by this constant like wave of fear and and this premonition ability that perhaps she has. And then like it's interesting to me that the show doesn't like specifically call that out, but I think it's there in
Yeah.
the in between everything. That scene with Luke, like when he starts shooting up and she's just kind of awkwardly there in the car, right?
Mhm.
Like I love what he says beforehand. Like the phrases he uses, the words that he uses are very specific. He just needs to get well, and he says that like over and over again. I just need to get well, and get well in this instance means do heroin.
Yeah.
That like he doesn't mean like I need to kick this and get healthy. No, like he says before I go in, I just need to get well, and that means shoot up.
Yeah.
And then he says the phrase, "It's just a little thing, Nellie." And then he says later in the thing is like she says she hasn't been doing good, and he goes, I know you haven't, you help me get well, and then you can tell me all about it, which is not like help me get clean and then we can have a conversation. That's about it. Like, no, let me do this drug and then we can talk about how you're feeling. And what is like the first thing he says to her after he shoots up is, you still collect those buttons, Nellie? It's like it's like the most surface level nonsense
Yeah.
conversation, because of course he's not going to actually care about how she's doing when he's high. Of course
Right.
he's not.
Yeah.
I do like also, by the way, this is a great thing that they did. The phrases he uses, the get well and just a little thing, are things that she parrots to Theo when Theo is confronting her about how you could like help an addict get drugs.
Mhm.
Like what she says to dismiss it is just he needed to get well and it's just a little thing, so can we drop it? Like
Mhm.
she's parroting the exact things he said to her, which I think is perfect. I really like that.
Yeah. I like this idea about which is more causal, or like is there a chicken and egg thing going on
Mm-hmm.
between like Nellie's struggles versus Luke's struggles, or is it a mistake to try to even sequence them? Is it just when you're in a really, really close relationship, your problems are their problems and their problems are your problems? There's
Yeah, there's no
no
beginning and end. Yeah,
y-
it's just it's all fucked.
now that I've said that, that does sound closer to what we're doing with this, where it's not like, oh, Luke, got a heroin addiction and now the neck lady is here. It's like, no, the bent neck lady was already here, but also maybe it, it just is a burden that they share, and I never like to use like judgmental language, but it's like what are we saying about their characters that they are both sort of doomed by this, or at least one of them is doomed by this. We
Yeah.
don't know that Luke is going to die. We just saw that premonition of him ODing. Although I kind of asterisk there, like it's so obviously him ODing that it makes me doubt that it's him ODing, if that makes sense. Um,
Sure.
but like, what are we saying about the nature of humanity, since all art is a commentary on humanity?
Yeah.
What is the message about like these siblings who are tied together and kind of can't help each other because it's like, is it like when two people are drowning, or when one person's drowning, you don't try to swim in and help them because they'll just pull you under? I mean, I don't feel like I have my hands around what we're saying with this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we can start like taking a broader look at the idea of ghosts largely. That this is something we talked about in the first episode and then didn't really bring back again, but the concept of ghosts as, I mean, as Steve says in it, as you know, he says it concludes with a wish, but like ghosts are trauma, ghosts are all these kids are haunted by the ghosts of their past, right? They're haunted by this thing, and by the ghost of their past I mean both literally and metaphorically, right? Like there's this horrible event that happened to them when they were all young, and they none of them have dealt with it. They are still carrying that thing with them everywhere they go. Even Hugh has not dealt with it, right? I think the recurring beat we see of the ghost of Liv just kind of hanging out with Hugh, like she's laying in bed with him, she's sitting behind him at the wedding, she's just always there with him, is very clear that he really hasn't processed this thing either. And
Yeah,
so they're all living with this thing. None of them are processing it. None of them are trying to work through it. Um, they're not even kind of being honest about what it is. Like, and the ones that are trying to be honest about what it is are being dismissed by the other members of what it is. So it's like there does seem to be this overarching thing of like just the almost inescapable like destruction of like bad things happening to
yeah.
you, and
Bad
like
things
how
happening
it
to you. Yeah,
facilitates more bad things. And like the ultimate question of the show is going to be, is this truly inescapable, right? Like can we break this cycle, we'll call it? Can we break free of this trap? For Nellie, the unfortunate answer was no, but there are 4 Crain children left, and maybe they will have better luck than she did.
yeah. I think part of it is that, like, not only are they not being honest, it's like they don't even see it. Like, this is one of the things. This kind of harkens back to the conversation we had about internal family systems therapy a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I forget what context that even was, to
Was
be
it Gerald's
honest.
game with
Yes,
Jesse
Gerald's
talking to
game.
herself?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gerald's game, and like just the fact of the matter is, when you have like a childhood trauma that is that deep, you don't know that that's the reason why you're behaving this way now.
Sure. Yeah.
In fact, even if it were pointed out to you, you would be like, "No, I'm reacting this way because it's ridiculous what he did. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous." And it's like, no, the reason you think it's ridiculous is because of the thing that happened when you were a child, and
Yeah.
that just has twisted your whole perception and like the lens you view the world through. So it's very, very hard to break those things because it's like it baked into who you are. It's not impossible, but you have to, first recognize that there's something to be fixed, which is often, I would say generally, even the step that people don't even get to, because
Yeah.
they just think like, this is who I am, this is the way I am, this is the way the world is. There's nothing to be fixed here.
Yeah.
um,
No, I think that's spot on. I like that. I like that a lot. I kind of, to talk about the scene a little bit more. One of the things that I didn't really pay attention to until like my second or third time through it, when Nell leaves the car and Luke is like left alone in the car, he glances down at her purse, and we get this quick insert shot to her purse that we see is like filled with her prescription medication that she's taking, right?
yeah,
And like the first time I watched this was like the thing that popped into my head was, oh, is he going to steal that? Like, cause he's so strung out, he's going to steal her medication as well. Cause he looks at that and then he goes, fuck. And I think one thing that my current interpretation of that sequence is actually no, he's actually realizing that she's just as fucked up as he is in a
Mhm.
different way. And she is like he is self-medicating for his problem, and she is medicating for her problem, and he's asking her to do these things for him while she's just as fucked up. And on some level he knows that, and he does realize it, and he is listening, but his addiction's so strong that it just, like, he has that one moment of I'll call it clarity, but that's immediately consumed and subsumed by, there's heroin here, I need to do it immediately.
I think you're spot on. I'm glad you said that because the camera, gives us a good long look at that. It's a meaningful moment, and I didn't know what to make of it. I think you're right. I think it's like these two twins. They are both they're both medicating because they both have demons haunting them. Right. This is one thing I don't know if we quite if I ever quite clearly thought this, but like the two young Crain children are the two the twins are the two who were and are the most explicitly haunted by an actual ghost.
Yes.
We have the hat man, the hat and cane man with Luke, and
Yep.
we have the bent neck lady with Eleanor. And none of the closest thing we have is Shirley. Every once in a while she sees something weird. It's not really quite the same thing.
Yeah.
Steve never sees anything. Theo experiences things, but not in like this terrifying, disturbing, horrifying way that the two younger ones do. So they both have the same, not exactly the same. They both have their own version of being haunted by a ghost, and then they medicate themselves to try to deal with that. Yeah,
Yeah. And so from this scene, she sees the bent neck lady, and then we immediately cut to a scene of her dumping all her pills. Which, by the way, I know what Tylenol looks like. I know they couldn't get actual medicine to dump down a toilet, but like I was just like, that's Tylenol.
Maybe she's prescribed Tylenol, Scott.
But anyway, I think it is really interesting because when I first watched the scene, the question I had is like, well, why is she choosing to dump her pills right here? And in watching back, I think this really interesting thing happens where she's seeing the bent neck lady and freaking the fuck out about it. And I think part of her dumping the pills is the bent neck lady. But the other thing that's happening is she's sitting next to her car, in the car next to her brother, shooting up heroin. And he's like in his like heroin stupor is saying the phrase, we all need a little help sometimes. And he's talking about the drug. He's not talking about her. He's talking about the drug. We all need a little help sometimes to get through it. And I think that paints this image of her. She connects the drugs that he's using to the drugs that she's using, and makes the decision like, I don't want this help. This is not the help I want. She dumps all her pills and then proceeds to lie to her therapist for the rest of the episode and lie to everyone about the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And like, whether or not, like, I guess the question here I have is like, Luke is definitely like an addict. He's suffering from the disease of addiction. Like, Eleanor is prescribed medication for, I don't know, probably anxiety and depression, and I don't know what her actual diagnosis is. I think the show wants us to just believe like she does have mental health issues. Ghost hauntings aside, like she does have some mental health issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get mental health issues from being tormented. So
Yeah.
So like yes and rather than one or the other.
And I mean, like, lose like everything aside, like you can fall into a depression losing your husband, especially in the way that she lost him.
Not only fall into a depression, but something like that, if you're prone to some kind of psychosis, it can trigger full-blown psychosis and hallucinations. Like that's the big difference between seeing the bent neck lady during a sleep paralysis episode and seeing her on the street is that the latter is like just that's psychosis. That's not just oh, your dreams are spilling out of dreamland. And that it was understandable that she would react really strongly to that. I had a maybe more like literal interpretation that was just like, I've never seen the bent neck lady outside of a easily waved away sleep paralysis context until now. And now is when I'm taking these pills, so I'm going to stop taking these pills because
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen again.
I think that's a perfectly fair read, and perhaps even the intended one for sure.
Yeah.
Man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Do you think she never talks to Shirley in this episode, right? We have a scene with Theo, where she's desperately reaching out to Theo for help. Theo rebuffs her, and then she lashes out at Theo. We have a scene with Steve that we talked about. We have the scene in the car with Luke. There is no Shirley scene in this episode. There is no moment where she reaches out to Shirley and is rejected or anything. That's interesting, right? I wonder if it's like we couldn't fit it, or just we're trying to say something more, or maybe a little bit of both. Because we couldn't fit it, we're using it to say something more about the character of Shirley.
Yeah, maybe there's some distance between them. I was gonna say, so we have the example of Shirley doing her makeup for the wedding, so they
Sure.
have, you know, we have evidence that they are friends. Shirley is protective of her, but I just feel like Shirley, my read on Shirley is like she's just not close to anyone. She's so like
Yeah.
angry and opinionated and kind of like has this feeling of like I have to take care of everybody and that means everybody needs to do what I say and listen to me, and that's kind of not a personality that you want to be around ever, but especially when
Hmm.
you're not like feeling good. So
Sure.
maybe or in all honesty, it could just be timing. Like, yeah, we could have done one extra scene with Shirley, but I think we kind of said what we needed to say with this episode, and it's already a longer episode, right?
Yeah, it's an hour and 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
it's about 15 to 20 minutes longer than the typical episode. Um,
I can
yeah.
imagine that there was an earlier draft where she talked to Shirley and it just was too long. Can imagine that.
Hmm.
I don't know.
We have to talk about some of the younger Shirley's or the younger Nell scenes we see. I think one thing that is just true about this episode, kind of across the board, is this is the most direct Shirley Jackson's Hill House adaptation that the show has been so far, right? Like and it kind of makes sense. We have Eleanor Vance, we have her dancing in Hill House, we see at the end of the episode, but we also get the Cup of Stars quotes in here. We get the writing on the wall part. Like, this is, out of everything the show has done so far, it feels like this episode is drawing from the book the most, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
So let's talk about the Cup of Stars scene. I'm pretty interested in this, actually. I want to get your perspective on this because so um Nell is playing, she opens up a toy box, finds this old tea set. We get a little bit of a history of Hill House, just a little bit of history of Hill House about um this tea set, that this was previously owned by a little girl that lived in this house, and I think Jacqueline Hill is her name, was a little girl whose mother, I believe, was the sick woman we've seen in bed uh, in the past episodes. Um, and so the show uses this moment with Mrs. Dudley and the Cup of Stars to bring back the quotes from Hill House, where in the book it was Eleanor saying it to herself, watching another little girl be told that she couldn't drink out of her cup, that she had to drink out of a normal thing. And she says, no, insist on your Cup of Stars. They're going to take everything away from you. You have to insist on your own thing. And in this story, it is Mrs. Dudley that's saying those lines to Nell. And this is like the closest thing to something I'm not sure I liked in the episode, because I just don't know what to do with it, really. Like, I think my problem is actually we just know so little about Mrs. Dudley at this point in the show that, like, part of me is like, why is she saying this to Nell right now? Like, and just missing that. So I'm just curious what your take on this scene was.
Well, so I will say that I agree that I don't understand what that particular character's motivation is for saying that. Um, it could be that, she recognizes that Nell is a little child who gets ignored and passed off, and maybe recognizes something in that, and says, you insist on your own happiness. Because what the context of it is, Nell is basically saying, I forget exactly what she says, but she's essentially saying, like, it's okay. I can't actually use it because it's too nice, so they won't
Yeah,
let me
saying
actually
mommy's
play
not
with.
going to let me use it because I break nice things.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
break night,
yeah,
and she's saying, "No, no, you insist on your cup of stars," meaning you insist on your own happiness. You insist on what you want, Nell. Don't pre give up before you even asked, because you
yeah.
expect to not get what you want out of life. Because you're right, nobody else is going to give a shit about what you want, so you have to give a shit. You have to fight for it. You have to insist. So within the context of Nell as a character in this show, it makes sense. Nell, it makes sense as a thing to say to Nell. Nell doesn't seem to absorb it, right? She doesn't. I mean, the closest thing we see to her insisting on her cup of stars is going to Steve's reading and
Yeah,
embarrassing him 6 years too late. I mean,
yeah.
he's kind of right on that count, where it's like, look, if you were going to do this, you should have done it 6 years ago. Like that would actually have been something that might have made a difference.
Hmm.
Um, she doesn't insist. She doesn't insist on her cup of stars. So, and neither
Yeah.
does Nell in the book, really. So,
Yeah, I mean
um,
the context of the book, for those that might have forgot, is, yeah, she's watching this little girl. This little girl is demanding to drink out of her cup of stars, which has been left at home. They're out at like a restaurant, and her parents are like, "No, you have to. You're going to drink out of this cup." And she's like, "No, no, you insist. Get what you want." And Nell is saying that because Nell is a person who, in her life, I'm calling her Nell, but in the book she's just Eleanor. She doesn't call herself Nell.
mhm.
Um, has never gotten what she wanted, has never stuck up for herself, has never put her foot down, has never demanded the things that she wants. And so she's looking at this girl forlornly, saying, like, you will be me in 20, 30 years unless you insist upon what you want. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I do see a through line of that for Nell, of like, this is one of Nell's problems, is that Nell, we talked about it earlier today, that like, there's two things you can do when no one is listening to you: when people talk over you, when people drown you out, when people dismiss you and your opinion because you're a woman, because you're the baby of the family. Both, you can accept that and just curl up and be silent, or you can insist upon yourself, right? You can keep talking even though the other people are talking. And Nell did not do that one. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a read that perhaps Mrs. Dudley, who's just like kind of hovering in the background of the house constantly, is seeing the way the family treats her and is responding to that. I guess just it is like, it is in, and I'm still not saying like I think this is bad. It's just like, we just know so little of this woman. And like, we've seen her in like two interactions, one of which she's talking about God, to Steve, and the other is this one. And it's just like, maybe we're going to fill this in later, if we learn more about her. But like, it is the one moment I felt like I felt the TV show like stretching in order to fit a reference, which is like the first time I have felt that way in these entire 5 episodes.
Mhm.
And so that's why it stuck out more to me.
Yeah, I think I feel you there. I mean, I honestly wasn't thinking that in the moment. I think there is a thing with Mrs. Dudley
Mhm.
where she just kind of feels like she's from a different movie, you know? And
Yeah,
this, and I don't even think that's a criticism. It's just like she has this floaty air of somebody from the late 1800s. She kind of dresses like that too.
sure.
She's busy, bustling about the house, caring for things. She almost seems like a ghost herself, um, where she's preoccupied. She's so preoccupied with the house, um, and kind of secretive. Um, and we just don't know what's up with her, right? Like clear. It seems clear to me that she knows things that
Yeah.
that she's not telling.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we get like an older Mrs. Dudley scene at some point, you know.
Sure. I mean, we perhaps have like she is like the key that can unlock the history of Hill House. We talked last week about how we just don't know very much of the history of this place yet,
Mhm.
and Dudley seems to at least know a little bit of it. She's been working there a very long time, and so maybe she's like the way to get into that. And yeah, in 1 week's time, in 2 weeks' time, in 3 weeks' time, whatever. Maybe I'm just completely reversed on this thing, but it was just one of the moments that stuck out to me that I was like, why are we talking about this right now? Like, what? This seems like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah. That didn't bug me in the moment. I kind of understand where you're coming from, but
So the other sequence is, of course, the writing on the wall,
mhm,
where while Eleanor is washing her cup of stars, her mother storms in very angrily and brings her over to a spot of the wall where Nell has written her name, or
mhm,
so Liv believes. Um, we learn later that it's Olivia who has written that. Um, by the way, in the sequence where at the very end where we see her and she's writing backwards,
mhm.
that was her writing backwards. They thought they were maybe going to have to do a special effect for that, and Carla Gugino just nailed the backwards writing
I love
just
that.
on her own.
That's so
So
creepy.
yeah, this scene is so fascinating to me, Matt, for many reasons. Obviously, we're calling back specifically to Shirley Jackson's novel, um, and we're also, I think, most importantly, getting another little bit of the deterioration of Olivia Crain. She's not doing well in this scene, right?
Mhm.
She's complaining about her headache again. She seems very out of sorts. She's also like really, really mad about a thing that like doesn't matter.
Like
Like
the wall's
yes, you
already
don't want
messed
your
up.
yeah, like you don't want your children writing on the walls, right? Yeah, obviously, like you don't want that. But like that wallpaper was like falling apart. They
Yeah.
were going to have to rip all the wallpaper off and completely redo the walls. So it's not like if Nell had actually just written on with chalk on the wall, which by the way, chalk so easy to get off.
Right.
Like it'd be different if it was like a marker or a crayon, but like chalk, that's fine. Um, so it just like we can kind of see that she's starting to lose it a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and that the effect that's having on her children,
Uh,
especially Nell.
it's a big jump, right? I mean, I feel like the next closest thing we saw was her kind of getting that headache while she was talking to Shirley, I believe.
Yeah.
And that didn't really seem like her losing her temper. That just seemed like her kind of getting a little overwhelmed. This was just her being like just enraged, like barely holding herself together, like almost totally overwhelmed with emotion and yeah, like losing it, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also she's very protective of the house, right? She's like,
Mhm.
it is our job to fix this house up and protect it. And it's like, it's your job to flip it. And
Yeah.
flipping it involves like completely tearing out the guts and redoing everything. So that might be a change. She's also wearing a bathrobe. Who knows what time of day it is, but that outfit she's wearing is a blue. I think it's a bathrobe. It looked like it was like tied in the middle with like a slip under it of some sort. Um, so maybe she's still in her PJs. And of
I think you're
course,
right.
the big comparison here is when Nell returns to the house as a grown up. Her mother is standing in the exact same spot that she was standing, finishing the welcome home Nell. The scene is framed in the exact same way, except Olivia is now wearing a red dress, robe, whatever, instead of the blue one that she was actually wearing at the time. So
Mhm.
the ominous change there.
Yeah.
I want to spend like a whole 20 minutes on the final 15 minutes of the show with you.
Yeah.
Uh, but I want to make sure I kind of want to do that last because it's
I
the end of the episode.
Yeah. Well, I personally, I feel like I hit all the main bullet points. I agree. It's funny. I wasn't intentionally saving the last bit for the end, but it's so consistent and sort of separate in a way, and yet it's the logical culmination of everything that led to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, whenever you're ready, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I wanted to mention, we haven't really talked about the Dr. Montague scenes.
Hmm.
I just want to mention that Dr. Montague is played by Russ Tamblyn, who played Luke in the 1963 version of The Haunting, as it was called. He came out of retirement to do that, to do these, I think,
Wow.
one day of shooting in these scenes because they asked him to. And he said, sure. And it also, Flanagan mentions this in his commentary that like they had a whole conversation where Russ Tamblyn asked her, what other jobs she's worked on. And she admitted that, like, this is my first job, which it is for Victoria Pedretti. And he said, oh, how perfect. This is my last, because he came out of retirement just to do this. So,
That's great.
how do you feel about the Montague scenes? Because I'm of two minds about them, and I had to watch them multiple times before I really kind of concluded on the way I felt about them. Because there's part of me that found Montague very off-putting at times.
Yeah, I think you're meant to. I think you're meant to. Again, we have heavy protagonist goggles for Nell. Montague is meant to be this not listening, out of touch stereotype of a psychiatrist who just wants to medicate you from Nell's perspective. But if you even for a nanosecond think, okay, but what does this look like from his perspective? What it looks like is a woman who is rapidly degrading in front of his eyes and probably is lying about taking her medication and persists in having obvious psychotic delusions and delusional beliefs about reality and about a crazy haunted house that killed her mom. So yes, like with everything in the show, he's meant to come off. I'm pretty confident that he's meant to come off as off-putting, but his position is actually reasonable. That's my feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I went down a whole rabbit hole where I was like, is he trying to get her to go back to Hill House? Is Dr. Montague actually just an emissary from the house itself that's pushing her? And to the point where like I had to refresh my memory of where the story goes. And I think that was just me getting inside my own head a little bit. But it is interesting. Like, I think it is like he is ultimately the one that kind of pushes her to go back to Hill House, not in the way that he was intending, just like, and I think the show sets this up really well because she comes to him like proudly saying, I confronted my brother just like you told me to do that. And he was like, well, I don't know if that's the word.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what I said to do, actually.
You did
and
what?
So,
yeah.
Yeah. And so this is like, if she had not died, she comes to her next session and goes like, I flew out to Hill House and confronted it just like you told me to do that. It's like, you went to a abandoned house at 1 a.m.
Uh-huh.
I did not tell you to do that.
Because
Nell?
I made an offhand comment about how you should face your fears. Yeah.
No, but it is perfect again to go back to our old thing that like the house is a carcass. It's just wood and stone and these things. And of course, like we know that that's not true.
Yeah.
But maybe on some level it is, right? Like,
yeah.
Is it the floors and the ceilings and the bricks of Hill House that makes it evil? Or is it the people and the things that have happened there that makes it evil,
Yeah, I like that. I also don't, if I was a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychiatrist. If I was a psychiatrist, I don't even know that the advice of, go to the thing you think is haunted and walk around in it. I think that's not bad advice because it's like, it's not haunted. There's this story that I like about a psychiatrist who had a patient who had severe OCD who would like have to leave work to go home to make sure that the hairdryer was off. And this would like happen every day and it was ruining her life and she was going to get fired for constantly leaving work to make sure the hairdryer is off. And the psychiatrist's treatment was, when you leave your house, put the hairdryer in your purse, bring it to work with you. And someone replied to this like, that's not psychiatry. You didn't treat the OCD. You just improved her quality of life dramatically. And it's like, yeah, exactly. so I think of that story in context of like, yeah, just go to the house, like just literally just go to the house, right? But of course, in this case, it's terrible advice because it's an evil house. But it doesn't seem like bad advice if you're a normal person who doesn't think there's ghosts.
Do you think the overarching lesson here is not like I definitely don't think it's like don't go to therapy because therapy is useless. I think it's more like therapy is not enough sometimes, that like the work of getting better or getting through things or dealing with things is exactly that. It's work. And so like because I'm trying to draw this through line with Flanagan's work, and this kind of insistence on living in a world in which all the things that we don't think are real are actually real, and we have all these medical professionals telling characters that they're not real but they are. And so what is, as you said, actual good advice for your mental health and well-being becomes bad advice in this specific scenario we've concocted for this show. And I just don't know exactly where to put that, you know?
Yeah. I guess I can. For me, it feels like this same idea of like fate, where it's like, look, there's no rule that says that there's a way out of this. There's no. This isn't fair.
Sure.
There's no. Therapy is a tool, like a gun is a tool to use against the horror movie monster, but the horror movie monster still kills you if you have a gun. That's a weird analogy, but like it's not there. There's no guarantee that therapy is going to work on any given problem. There's no
Yeah.
guarantee that any given problem has a solution, and that's like
Yeah.
a harsh, horrible truth. One of the we haven't talked about this in a few episodes, but we were talking about the idea of death, because the first several episodes dealt with the siblings reacting to the death of Nell, and like an idea that
Hmm.
kind of said a few times in there was like, never in quite these words, but like death is just this horrible, horrible thing. And we invent rituals and sort of like stories and framings and religions and all kinds of like cognitive structures and practices to not have to confront it directly, because confronting it directly is horrifying, and having to live with it in its raw state would drive us all mad. So we don't. Um, but that's not solving the problem. That's a pretty mask on it. And I think maybe what this show is saying, and maybe even a broader sort of Flanagan theme, is like a lot of life is like that. Actually, a lot
Yeah.
of life is like horrible and would be maddening in like the Lovecraft sense if you actually had to just live with it. But we don't live with it. We distort things. We blind ourselves on purpose.
Yeah. No, I like that. I mean, sometimes, your spouse has an aneurysm and dies.
Right.
Sometimes your kid drowns in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Sometimes like your husband goes missing for 3 years, 7 years, however many it was. And like these are things that happen, and they happen to people all day every day, and we desperately search for a reason, a monster, a ghost, an evil entity, um because knowing that exists and being able to confront a physical thing would maybe allow us to deal with it, and maybe ultimately even if those things exist, like even if you live in a world in which, yes, like we know now that Nell did not kill herself, right?
Mhm.
But she's still dead,
Right.
right? And it's like okay, like so what do we do now, right? And like
Mhm.
this presuming that a similar thing happened to Olivia, right? That Olivia, who we've been told killed herself, a similar thing happened. The house got her.
Yeah.
Okay, well she still died, and we have to deal with that.
Right.
We have to find a way to live with that.
Yeah.
Or maybe we don't. And like you can say, like that's the thing, it actually terrifies me, because I do want to believe that like I'm a very like solution oriented person. So like there's a problem, the problem has a solution, and it's like, so everything in my life, I'm having a problem, I can find a way to solve it. And sometimes with this mental health stuff, with this trauma stuff, it's like there's not just like a solution to it.
Yeah.
Like you don't just like do XYZ and it'll get better. And it's like you could be doing all the right things, you could be making all the right choices. Like I think that having Luke be an addict is perfect in here, because like Luke can stay clean for the rest of his life and he'll still be a drug addict. Like
Mhm.
that's just the way that works. It's
Mhm.
just the way that works. And that's not a thing anyone wants to hear. That's not a thing I want to hear.
Yeah.
But that's just the truth of the matter, I think.
Yeah, I know it's very uncomfortable. The idea of things that can't be fixed. Even the idea that I keep bringing up of like, oh, it's an evil house. The house did it. This is yet another little coping mechanism where it's like, I want a villain that I can be mad at, because being
Mhm.
mad feels better than feeling sad. And like, let's just imagine it doesn't quite work with the way the story has been told up to this point, but just like imagine that we found out that, oh, there's just a really bad methane leak in Hill House, and when the characters are in Hill House, they're having hallucinations and they become disoriented and they die in ways that look like suicide, but actually it's just methane poisoning. Suddenly, you don't get to feel that sting of righteous, like, yeah, we're gonna beat the house. It's just like, oh, you just have to turn off the methane valve.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Well, yeah, I
pointless.
mean,
It's pointless, right?
yeah, yeah. And, well, and even in the context of the show, like, what does beating the house mean, right? Like, are they going to burn Hill House to the ground? Would that be winning? I don't know. We'll see. Um, it's a
I
lot.
mean, like, what's funny is I really want that to happen, but like, if it's a Hill House adaptation that sticks to the book, then we leave Hill House standing. So
Sure. Yeah.
we'll see.
Lots to think about, lots to consider, lots to find out about in our 5 remaining episodes.
Yep.
All right. The final 15 minutes, though. Here we go. I love everything about the sequence from the second that the lights come on at Hill House and that front porch light blinks twice
Mhm.
and Nell is called into the house. I think it's just masterful work all around. Performances, filmmaking, editing, all of this stuff. It is this beautiful, heartbreaking scene that just devastates me. It like
Yeah.
from all of it. Like the second Nell walks in and like everyone, she walks in the door and everyone stops and notices her and says like, oh, here you are, everyone's waiting for you. And like
I always should
it's
have believed
the
you
house is constructing a world
about
that Nell
everything.
wants to live in,
Yeah.
where everyone listens to her, everyone believes
I'm
her,
so sorry
everyone
for your fault.
apologizes to her, everyone says you were right the entire time, it's my fault, I knew, I always knew. Like it's painting this perfect picture,
I'm so
and then
proud of
and then
you.
at the end it gives her a clean Luke, and Luke is clean because of her. It's because of what she said and because of what she did. And then Arthur shows up, and it's just the music from their wedding starts playing, and then Flanagan does this really mean thing where he cuts back and forth between this happy scene of them dancing through the house to the moments of the first episode we saw where she was dancing in this decrepit house by herself.
Yeah.
And
Y-
and again, we know what's coming, right? We
Yeah.
know she's going to die. Like it's coming faster and faster now. And it's all devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, he waits just long enough to cut to the to what's really happening that you kind of are lulled into it with her.
Yeah.
I was really fascinated with the sleight of hand he does, where I just feel like we are so invested in Nell and her state of mind. We've been watching her deterioration sort of slowly over the course of years and then more rapidly over the last few days. And then it's like she just kind of cracks when
Yeah.
she walks in the house. And it's like she's so lost and traumatized that she on some level is accepting this. I say on some level because even as she's dancing with Arthur, she has this smile on her face, and it's this kind of a horrible, like our listeners can't hear me, but it's like a terrified smile, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. It's not a straightforwardly happy smile. There's a huge amount of tension in this smile. It's like a desperate smile, you could say.
This is a thing that Victoria Pedretti does so well throughout this
Mhm.
entire episode, but especially the scene, yeah, where she plays this character with such a desperation in her eyes and her smile that like even when she's happy, yeah, you can kind of see it leaking in on the sides. I love like to go back to the Montague scenes quickly. Like she does these 3 scenes in which we see various stages of her collapse essentially, and just like it's so easy to mark just in how she's holding herself and their looks and her face acting, like how far along she is in this degradation.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic work. And
Right.
yeah, in this end sequence, yeah, it's just like she's always on the verge of tears, always crying, always happy, but like terrified
Hmm.
at the same time.
I think like part of her knows she's lost it,
Yeah,
and part of her is like, okay,
I
then.
don't care.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
care.
care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just a note, you were kind of going through the things people are saying to her, and interestingly, it reminded me of not necessarily of the Haunting of Hill House, but of We Have Always Lived in the Castle,
Hmm.
where there are parts in there where the character is sort of narrating their like fantasy of how their family had treated them instead of how they were really treated.
Hmm.
Um, that like some of the things you said in there sounded like they could have been verbatim from that book. Anyway,
I like that.
Thematically related book though.
I,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, just also by Shirley Jackson. I don't remember if I said that. Yeah.
What I love, like, this is so this is actually a momentous occasion because this is the first time all the adult actors have like all been in the same room together. Like, we've gotten a lot of them in the same room together, but this is like the first time the entire adult cast has been in the same room together, and yet it's not them, right?
Mhm.
Like, one thing I love about what the actors do, and I think what Flanagan directed them in the scene, what he said he directed them in the scene, is like, so you all have this really complicated backstory for your characters, and your characters are all nuanced and complex, and there's multiple reasons for why they do everything, and for this scene I want all that to go away. They are playing shells. They are playing shells of who they are,
Mhm.
poor approximations. So dump all that stuff out and just be a shell. And I
Mhm.
think they all do such a great job because there's something terrifying about this scene. Like,
Yeah.
it's an objectively happy moment where she's getting to see the man that she lost, her husband, and like they're all kind of just standing behind her, not really like not smiling, but not
Yeah.
like full. Yeah, you're doing it on camera right now. Just like this, like just like perfectly sensible smile, I think is what Flanagan described it as in the commentary. But like, it's really off-putting. It's really uncomfortable. They are not being the like. Again, talking about the overall structure of the show, we put this at the midpoint of the show, and now we know who all these people are. And so we can immediately recognize that's not Steve. That's
Yeah.
not Theo. That's not
Oh,
Shirley.
Theo, I believe, is not wearing gloves.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. I another little detail I thought was interesting here is that Lee is there.
Mhm.
Steve's wife is there. Shirley's husband not there. So I guess the house is like, nah, fuck that guy.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
that's funny.
interesting little wrinkle there.
That's funny.
But yeah,
Yeah,
they're
well,
all kind of
it's the be
silently watching and not like she's weeping, and
yeah,
like it. You would think that her family, happy to see her happy, would have like an empathic response to that, and none of them do.
yeah.
They're just kind of yeah.
Yeah, I know. Hello.
um,
I
And then
love
we
it.
do this cool 360 shot at the very end of the dance where they're dancing, and we do this 360 spin around them, and we see her entire family. Then we see Mr. Dudley. And then, Matt, we start seeing some ghosts.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. You didn't catch those other people? They
Nope.
were not hidden in the background. They were right there.
Nope.
There's a man in a bowler hat.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that, sorry.
Yeah.
I was
There's a man in
focusing
a
on
bowler
the
hat.
thing.
There's a woman in like a flapper dress.
Okay.
So we kind of transition from seeing the ghost versions of all these characters that the house is creating to some of the actual Hill House ghosts.
Mhm.
He's holding a bowler hat and a cane, very clearly supposed to be. Um, and if you're watching the show for the first time and you see all these ghosts, you're like, hey, wait a minute. There's one ghost missing from here. Where's the bent neck lady?
Uh-huh.
It's like, well, when then we find out.
Yeah.
And I the sequence where she climbs the staircase and gets to the top, like I think we talked about the staircase a little bit in the first episode, but like I love the design of this house, and I love that the way Flanagan has taken the spiral staircase from the novel that exists in the library, and really in the novel just like goes up to a platform at the top it doesn't go anywhere. He's kind of changed that in this, where it's the staircase that heads up to the hallway that leads to the red room, and so they're going up there to have their tea party. And then they reach the top, and we know what's happening. We were primed on what's happening because Liv chastised Hugh about those ropes hanging from the top of that scaffolding
Yeah.
26 years ago, and he said he would get to them, and he did not.
Yeah.
Um,
There's such a uncomfortable horror to the sequence where she's looking at the railing. She sees the knot. It's not really quite a noose, actually.
mhm.
But it's effectively a noose. She like puts her hand on it, and then it's like there's a sequence of cuts that are made where it's like now she's closer to it. She didn't move closer to it. She just is closer to it. Now she's on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Now the rope's on her neck, and none of these things are. You don't see them happen. She's not doing them.
Yeah.
But you can buy it as just like the house has been tightening its anaconda squeeze on her this whole time that she's been in the house, and now it's basically possessing her. I think it possessed Liv. Like that's been my interpretation for some time, is that once it gets far enough in, it can just possess you and just do whatever it wants with you. And I think that's basically what it did here.
Well, what we have in this moment is Liv putting the locket around her neck, right? The locket that we see in one of the first moments of the episode is Liv has a locket that has pictures of both Luke and Nell in it. And she keeps them safe in the locket, and she promises that when Nell is a little bit older, she'll give the locket to her. And so this is the culmination of that. I do think it's interesting. We have from both of Nell's parents, we have the promises of jewelry. Liv promises she'll give the locket to Nell. Hugh gives the watch to Nell and promises he'll come back to get it. And neither of those promises are fulfilled on either side. But here it is at the very end, and I think we're supposed to feel in that moment is when Olivia is putting the locket around Nell's neck. This is when the noose is actually being placed around her neck, whether it's by herself or the actual ghost. We don't know. I really want to talk about Carla Gugino's performance in this final moment, though, because we don't really know what's going on, but Olivia seems not only to actively know what she's about to do to her daughter, but she feels distraught about it in a way you wouldn't expect. Like, this is the ghost that's just an embodiment of this evil house to feel.
It's the first time that, so the whole time that she's been in the house, all of the ghosts, including Liv, have just seemed like shells, like you said a bit ago. In this moment, there's like a crack in that, and she seems like there's something else. Maybe the real persona of her mom, actually for the first time showing its face, but or struggling to show its face. Or, it's unclear. You know, there's an interesting. I've never quite managed to work this in before, but it's interesting how like the bent neck lady is one thing, which is Nell, but there's the other Nell ghost, which is the Nell ghost that appears to Steve and appears to Luke. Neither of those are the bent neck lady. Neither of those have the same sort of like malevolent quality of your typical Hill House ghost, if you know what I mean. That really just seems like Nell's ghost in a straightforward fashion, right? And it's like so maybe the true ghost of Liv is somewhere in here, and it's being sort of like masked and strangled by the house, right? Could be totally off track. This is kind of what I'm thinking though right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, because even the moment of when Liv pushes quote Nell off the edge, like, it's not a moment of haha, I've got you now. She kisses her on the forehead and said, "It's time to wake up, sweetie." And then, while kind of crying, and pushes her daughter to her death. So it is. I think you're so right. It is a stark contrast with everything we've seen up until that point in the house, which is like maximally creepy, maximally cold. It seems like Liv is mournful about this. but doing it anyway. And we don't know what to make of that, but it sticks out to you.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Nell in that scene, man, when she just like, I think just being a parent, having even a full grown adult like looking at someone and in desperation saying, "Mommy," like it just breaks something inside me,
Yeah.
because like that is when I just started weeping. It's like this moment of "Mommy," and it's this
Yeah.
confused moment of like, I thought you were here to protect me. I thought you were here to look out for me, and suddenly you are the source of my threat and danger.
Yeah.
That just like it's it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah. Really, really hurting us.
Mhm.
I don't know. I actually don't know the meaning of, it's time to wake up, sweetie. I was thinking about that. Like how much do I want to dig into this? Like, is it because I mean it's a creepy thing to say before killing someone, but I'm like,
Sure.
is there more to that? And I have no further ideas on this. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Um but I do know that Mike Flanagan allows us to watch her be hanged,
Uh huh.
and then he holds his camera on it. It's not like we see Nell drop and then immediately upon the noose going tight, we start traveling through the moments of the bent neck lady. Like first we just do this hard cut to the dilapidated version of the house, and then she just hangs there for like 4 seconds. And it's just like it is very often like I feel like you see hangings a lot in media. Like it's a popular way of showing death in media, hangings. But I don't think I've ever seen a hanging quite like this, that is just so stark and yet unflinching in its depiction of it. Like we hear the snap and we just watch her hang silently with no music around for seconds before we then cut to a close up on her face as we run through everything.
Yeah. Well, there's also the horrible, and I agree with that, but like just the grotesqueness of you finally get to see the bent neck lady in a little bit better light, and
Yeah.
I guess without the blue paint.
Yeah.
And what you see is like her spinal column is like jutting out at an angle
Yeah.
relative to her head, which is what would happen. I mean, you said that's what hanging. That's what a proper hanging is it snaps the spinal column completely, or at least severs the spinal cord. Um, and it's I've never seen it depicted like that, right? It's a horrible thing to see. So hanging is a horrible thing to think about too. Like
Yeah.
any kind of decapitation, which is basically what hanging is. Like we lie basically. We say, oh, decapitation, hanging, die instantly. It's like, no, you don't. You're you, you can your brain survives for a solid 3 seconds, a solid 3 count, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, without any new blood flow. That's the minimum amount of time that you're going to remain conscious uh, before you actually die from a hanging.
Awful.
Yeah,
Awful.
I mean, I
And
could
then
be
we go
wrong,
through
but
and we see every moment going from the most recent to the first appearance of the bent neck lady. And I think the reveal that she's screaming and saying no, not to scare Nell, but in just the horrified realization of the truth of everything,
yeah,
is like, I love it in that it's just so deliciously evil
yeah,
and awful.
right,
It's just like, we talked to the last 2 episodes, we left on maybe not exactly a super positive note, but like we felt, I think we felt like maybe Theo was starting to work towards something, right? And we
uh-huh.
felt that, Luke he is sober, and he went through that whole process and he did not cave. Although the image of Nell that we see here maybe does say that's not going to last, but who knows? But we left them with a little bit of positivity. Shirley and Steve not so much, but then Nell is just like, and of course we knew it was coming because we know the end of the story at the beginning of it. Like it was never going to end well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's delightfully evil. I mean, that like there is. I admit, part of me was shattered and deeply saddened and upset by the events of this episode. And part of me was like, yeah, that's so fucked up. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of why we watch horror. Like this is a thing I think we had plenty of time to talk about with Stephen King, where it's like, look, I'm not going to pretend to not think that was badass when that horrible thing happened. Also, it was sad, but like, we all know why we're reading Stephen King. We all know
Yep.
why we're watching Mike Flanagan's movies. It's because we kind of love this messed up shit.
Yeah, no, definitely. We definitely do. And I think that part of that is the struggle of Steve. I think that Steve is personified of that struggle where like we don't believe in any of the shit and we know it's awful, but yeah, we can't stop reading it.
Yeah.
And we just want to raise our hand and ask Flanagan to talk about Hill House some more.
Could you talk? Yeah. I have another question about, yeah, that's great.
So a couple more things before we go. There's a sequence I noticed in the New Year's Eve scene when Nell is proposed to by Arthur. Nell's friend and maid of honor is there, and in that scene, she totally like clocks Theo and notices her. It's like it's there it's in the background of the scene. It doesn't draw attention to itself, but I thought that was like delightful and that like, oh, these two people like noticed each other before the wedding and they just decided to hook up at the wedding itself.
I love it. I didn't notice that.
One other thing I really, really love is at the very beginning, we didn't talk about this, the very beginning of the episode where she sees the bent neck lady for the first time, and then we cut to her in bed with Olivia and Hugh. And the first time she enters, says the line "bent neck lady," she says it was like some kind of bent neck lady. And Hugh Crain, while looking at Liv, says like, "That's a new one," and he has like Henry Thomas's like smirk on his face when he does that. And like there's a part of you that sees that and goes, you asshole, like she just went through this traumatic experience. But like if you're a parent, everyone has experienced their kid like coming in, they were scared with something and telling some story, and like you secretly actually think it's the funniest thing in the world because you know it's not real, and it's just kind of funny. It's just kind of funny when like, and so like I don't know, there's a way of being really dismissive and mean to Hugh in that moment, but I also was I related incredibly hard to this. My son came into our room at 2 a.m. on Saturday night and ended up sleeping in bed with us the whole night. It's a horrible mistake, but like sometimes the random things that kids' imaginations concoct are kind of funny, right? Even when it's stuff that scared them.
Well, sometimes it's funny and sometimes it makes your hackles stand up, and so you say, that's a new one, and is sort of gonna play off how creepy that was so that I don't freak anybody out.
Yeah. It's just like kids say the darndest thing, and sometimes it's really creepy. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. All right, that's really all I had. I mean, one thing I guess I wish we had talked about was kind of how the show illustrates the fluctuation of time and how like how Nell is starting to lose time and how that kind of perfectly relates to preparing us for the eventuality of the realization of time not being as one way flowing as we thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's all sorts of stuff I could say there, but I don't want to go full chocolate on this one because I don't like. Okay, I'll just say what I was thinking because maybe I'm brain poisoned from. I really like time travel stories. Personally, I read a lot of time travel stories. So as soon as you even intimate that time travel might be on the table, I begin thinking like, well, okay, time travel opens up the possibility to change the past. So you can undo bad things that have happened in the story by time travel. Now, I don't really think that's going to happen in this story.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, having watched half of this show, do you think this is that kind of show?
I don't think it's a thing Mike Flanagan would do. I don't think it's that kind of show. I don't think it would really be at all in keeping with The Haunting of Hill House, the novel. It was a thought that I had. That's all.
Sure.
But I bring it up here because you were talking about like the fluidity of time. More broadly, we've talked about this idea in a different sense with regards to how, like with any of our characters as we go through their story, we weave in and out of past and present in this way
Yeah.
where I think, like we said some previous episode, there's kind of not a difference. Like the character is living both of those moments at the same time because the past is tied to the present.
Yeah.
And that's even more so true for Nell, I think, where to the point where it becomes confusing to her.
Yeah, I mean, one of the effects I really like in this episode that I think also mirrors the way Flanagan did some stuff in Oculus is when Nell first gets to the hotel that she's staying at and that they stayed at the night they fled the house. She looks out her car window and headlights illuminate her face, and it is the headlights that illuminating her face are the car as the Crains drive up 26 years prior. And I think that does a really good job in and of itself of showing how, at least in her mind, these timelines are becoming increasingly blurred. Another effect that I noticed is when little Nell is sleeping on the couch, we hear the ticking of a grandfather clock in the background, and when the bent neck lady shows up, the ticking starts to dramatically slow down to kind of show how her presence is in and of itself kind of not warping time, but like we're just tying time and clocks and all these concepts into this episode. I think very, very intentionally to draw this point of hey, the end is the beginning is the end type thing.
The pocket watch that she's holding, like, isn't it stopped when she's an adult?
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah.
So it's like that she's frozen in that past. The time is stopped for her. Yeah.
Yep. Great stuff. Great stuff. Loved it all.
Me too.
All right. Well, I think we've covered this episode enough. We're way over on time. But time doesn't matter because it's all fluid.
It's fluid.
The last thing I'll say is like the universal sign for someone is having a bad time is to throw pizza boxes in their bedroom. And we do that a lot. Like she's got like at one point, like 5 pizza boxes stacked up on a dresser. It's just really good set dressing. I really enjoyed that.
We've all been there, man.
So everyone that's listening to this, if you're in your bedroom, I want you to all look around. And if there's a pizza box somewhere, it means you're not doing well.
Yeah. And the number of pizza boxes correlates with, how close you are.
Jesus. All right. So that was The Haunting of Hill House, episode 5, The Bent Neck Lady. What an incredible episode of television, Matt. So good. Yeah,
I loved it. Love the show.
And from here, we are going to move on to episode 6, titled Two Storms. Ooh, 2 storms. What does that mean?
I don't know. I have no idea.
It is really exciting. We're moving to like the second half of the show now. We're moving kind of in uncharted territories. We had, as I said at the beginning, we had our kind of structural conceit as at least like the scaffolding of what we thought the show was going to be. And we've worked through all 5 Crain children. We've worked through the end of the beginning, as it were, and now we move on to the rest.
Yeah, cool.
I don't want to do it this week because we're already over, but I want to have a conversation with you next week on like kind of the structural decisions of the show and how kind of insane it is to structure a show like this. Like obviously I love it, right? But like, I don't know. I was just thinking a lot. We had some listeners talk about how they were bored by one of the episodes a few weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
And like, while I obviously disagree with that, there's parts of me that understand why, because like we are 5 hours into this thing and the inciting incident of the show has we've just gotten to the point past where that happened, essentially.
Or we just understand what it was, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just really, really, really interesting to talk about. And I think I want to go into that more. And maybe as we see through episode 6, what maybe the structure of the rest of the show will look like, it's a better place to have that conversation.
Sounds good.
All right. So let's wrap this thing up with some quick discussion question answers. Matt, what did we ask the people? This was the Theo episode, right?
This was the Theo episode. And the question was, what was your favorite depiction of ESP in media? From BusyDad82, I recently finished a book of Matheson short stories. One story that comes to mind is Mute, in which a little boy, Paul, loses his parents in a fire. He ends up staying with the town sheriff and his wife, who have recently lost their own son. Come to find out that Paul doesn't speak because his parents communicated with him telepathically, and that his power fades when people around him are speaking aloud. I won't spoil the ending, but there is also a version of this story that became one of the dozen or so episodes of The Twilight Zone that Matheson wrote. Cool.
Huh, cool.
Never heard of it.
I like that. Yeah, either. Apocalypse Win 7 says, desperately trying to think of a non-Stephen King example. There's a short story called It's a Good Life, which was later adapted into an iconic Twilight Zone episode. A 6-year-old boy with godlike mental powers, including the ability to read minds, isolates his town from the rest of the universe and molds reality to his will. All the townspeople are under his rule. They are forced not only to do his bidding, but also train their minds to endorse whatever grotesque and insane whims that a 6-year-old can concoct. Can you tell I'm the father of a young boy? Anything less than wholehearted endorsement of the boy's actions results in that person being teleported to the cornfield, a place that is deliberately left vague, but needless to say, is not somewhere you want to end up. It's one thing to hide the outward expression of your true feelings, but the idea of having to constantly shield your thoughts sounds singularly exhausting and terrifying. I think we've referenced that Twilight Zone episode like multiple times throughout our podcasting run, but
Yeah.
I agree with this. That's a really good one.
Right. And what's funny is I may have never even actually seen that Twilight Zone episode. It's just one of the ones that's baked into your mind from osmosis.
I just love it as this perfect thing of like someone was raising a child and was like watching the incredible mood swings that a kid can have when they go from getting what they want to not getting what they want and saying, okay, but what if this person had powers?
Yeah. What if they had power over me the way I have power over them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Durin Longbeard says, my favorite story involving ESP is Matilda. It's a harrowing story about a principal that is doing her absolute best with a severely understaffed and underfunded school. And after saving up a small amount of funds to purchase a used car, she is unjustly targeted by the car salesman's psychic daughter. She enrolls in the school and proceeds to incite a riot, slips a newt into her water glass, and manipulate the principal's niece, a teacher, into breaking into her house and stealing her candy. She uses her abilities to fake a haunting of the house, making the principal believe her dead father has come back to haunt her, ultimately driving her insane to the point where she has to leave her job, her home, and the town. It's basically Carrie, but less blood and more chocolate cake.
It's certainly an interpretation of the events of Matilda.
Which came first, Matilda or Carrie? I have to know.
I mean, Matilda was a Roald Dahl story, right?
Yeah. So I'm inclined.
Said that. Yeah.
But also.
Okay, Matilda the novel came out in 1988, so the answer is Carrie. But like,
wow.
But like that's Matilda is not about a wonderful principal of a school that's done nothing wrong.
Okay, no, but it is about a little girl with telekinetic powers.
I mean, that is true.
So,
and her dad is
checkmate
and evil Danny DeVito.
Gosh, I remember the dad character so vividly, where he would. God, I remember that story so well. I read that 35 years ago or something.
I probably only seen it like once, but I do have very distinct memories of it for sure.
It's a good story.
Hobo Demon says, so I've started reading the Discworld series later in life than I should have, as Pratchett is absolutely delightful. And in the Witchcraft series, of which I've so far read Equal Rights and Weird Sisters, an ESP ability. I said ESPN. I got sports on the brain. An ESP ability accessible through witchcraft, but not wizardry, is demonstrated as sort of radical empathy by which the practicing witch borrows the body of a nearby animal or tree or door or castle or country and may temporarily possess both said corpus and the mental abilities or lack thereof of said corpus, resulting in a not insignificant whiplash and disorientation on to the naif upon returning to one's own senses and one's own corpus, which one hopefully would left in trustworthy care. It's very animorous, but simultaneously more lighthearted and less shell-shocked than the series leads the reader. Hobo Demon, that was that a quote from from Pratchett.
It
That
feels
was a lot of words.
feels very Pratchett. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to comment. I once had a crossword puzzle where one of the answers was Esper, and I was always really mad because I was like, "That's not a fucking word. That's not a word." And here, Hobo Demon just used the word Esper in their answer. So,
well, they used ESPer.
yeah, that was the sense in which the crossword answer was. It was
okay. Well, everybody knows that Espers are the summons in Final Fantasy VI. So I don't know what you're talking about.
talking about what Hobo Demon's talking about this thing. Anyway, Don Zest says the answer is Peter Venkman's effect of negative reinforcement on ESP ability test at the beginning of 1984's Ghostbusters. Simple test. He has two subjects and holds cards to see if they're able to describe the shape on the backside. The young woman is wrong in every guess, but he tells her she is right, receiving a friendly smile and flirting. The young man also guesses wrong, is told he is wrong, and receives an electric shock. As the test continues and the guy becomes more agitated with the punishment, he eventually successfully describes the card, but Dr. Venkman still tells him he's wrong, administering the shock. As a kid, it was just funny. Rewatching this clip, it is hilarious, but I wonder, was this a valid test? Was this young man truly able to read the card through the negative reinforcement, or a lucky guess? Could Dr. Venkman have just been out to get a date with a pretty young woman? Likely both. I always assumed that the man in the scene was actually psychic, and Venkman was just such a pig-headed moron that he just didn't care or didn't notice, or both.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the dean says to him later in the movie is, "You, Dr. Venkman, are a poor scientist." I think that's just true. I think he's like, I love this movie so much, and I love Bill Murray's performance. But yeah, like, it seems like, how did Pete Venkman get a PhD? Like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way.
That's the funniest part of the concept is like, how did he even get in this position in the first place?
I do love that scene.
Who hired Bill Murray as a professor? Yeah, me too. All right, so I'm going to run through the remaining answer summaries real quick. Steve Living Room chooses Johnny from the Dead Zone for his believable character arc, and also mentions the haunted air. Baby Can You Dig Your Sam picks Liv Moore from iZombie, who gains memories by eating brains to solve murders.
Great show. Creative.
Big Willie XXL selects D.H. Lawrence's The Rocking Horse Winner and jokes about middle school discussions of it. I feel like I know what this is, but I don't remember what this is.
Sounds real familiar. Found it familiar until you. Maybe this is just how the brain works.
Until I started running my big mouth.
You said you were familiar with it, and I was like, "Oh, actually."
Yeah, it super sounds familiar. I don't know. Yeah. The Man in Black 19 prefers Jedi as a child, but now favors Sith characters like Palpatine. And they also, of course, are a fan of Randall Flagg, unsurprisingly given the name.
Why have you become evil, Man in Black 19?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, evil is just so much cooler. OK Row 2424 discusses the anime The Disastrous Life of Psyche K, where psychic powers are portrayed as burdensome. And finally, Whack-A-Man 98 cites Drusilla from Buffy and Angel, a natural psychic born in the 1800s with the gift of visions.
It's a pretty cool vampire. Matt, you should watch that show.
I'm sure you could just give all sorts of commentary on this.
I could. I won't. Because I don't want to spoil it for you when you eventually watch the show.
All right. Good.
Thank you, everyone, for sending those in. That was really great. I enjoyed that very much. And it kind of a great kind of palate cleanser from the sad episode we just watched and talked about.
All right. So next discussion question. This discussion question, the answers will actually be read on episode 8, just due to some wrinkles with our recording schedule. It is what it is. Anyway, the question is, how do you deal with not being listened to?
Oh, I love this one so much. I like this a lot. This is the kind of the center of Nell's struggle, and maybe we could all offer her some advice from beyond the grave.
Yeah. Because I think we've all been there, even if it was just when you were a child. I think we've all felt this way at some point in our life.
Yeah, and maybe people have some great advice for it. Maybe people like just haven't been able to, and that's been one of the struggles of their lives, is just being heard, being listened to. Yeah.
Yep.
This is cool. I like it. All right, folks, that is it for us this week's. Next week, we continue with episode 6 of Hell House. Not Hell House, Hill House. Hell House was the graffiti on it as Nell went into it. Episode 6 of Hill House, titled Two Storms. I don't want to say too much about this one, Matt, other than it is a technological marvel, this episode, and I can't wait for you to watch it.
Oh, that's an exciting hook.
Yeah.
All right. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, on Twitter at flanaganswake19, and at the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. We already mentioned the socials. You know where to go. You know where to find us. Also, don't forget that you can find almost every episode on YouTube. We encourage you to watch these episodes on YouTube because there's really fun flourishes in terms of the video of the episode being cut into our discussion to emphasize whatever thing we're trying to draw attention to. I think it works really well. We really enjoy that. So
yeah,
check that
as
out.
long as YouTube doesn't take them all down, we should be good there.
That's right.
Also, if you want to support us via some great merchandising, you can head on over to doofmedia.myshopify.com. You will find sweaters, you will find t-shirts, you will find mugs, you will find stickers, you will find everything that a good merch collector can find. I love all the different things we have over there. I really do. Once again, this Ghost Bear mug from our conversation on Hill House. I never thought the thing that we would take out of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House was a ghost bear, but here we are. Yeah. There's also a Nellie's in the Red Room mug that I just absolutely adore, and some great t-shirts that I really like. I should be wearing them, but I'm not. Check that out. doofmedia.myshopify.com.
Yeah, everyone remembers the ghost bear scene from Haunting of Hill House.
Can't wait to see how Flanagan's going to interpret that.
Me too.
In this show.
If you like Flanagan's Wake and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia.
And if you cannot afford to donate, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing the podcast. You guys are doing a great job at that. Please keep it up. You can also help us out by leaving rating and reviews on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. This week's Spotlight review comes from Cliff R., who leaves us an Audible review. He says, "A haunting podcast. These gentlemen are killing it with The Wake. I've been a long-time listener who found them at episode 1 of their Kingslingers podcast, and they now are a giant part of my weekly podcasting diet. If you are looking for bright and funny hosts who give a really fresh take on media, then you might have been too timid to approach, check out Matt and Scott. Long days and pleasant nights." When they call us bright and funny, do you think like they mean that one of us is bright and one of us is funny? And I will leave it up to everyone to pick which is which.
The funny thing is, I think we both would prefer to be the funny one.
Yeah, probably.
No, Scott, obviously we're both bright and funny. Obviously.
Bright and or funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cliff, for your kind words. And thank you sincerely, everyone who has taken the time to send those rating and reviews in. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't write ratings and reviews. I should do it. I do what I say and not what I do is my standby there. So I know how hard it is sometimes to come up with the words and think of things to say and to take the time to do it. And we do appreciate you guys that do that. So thank you so much.
Yeah. You're literally all better than us because we don't do the thing that you're doing. So thank you.
Yep. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed this one. We will be back next week with episode 6, Two Storms. Until then, rest in peace, Nell and Mr. Flanagan.
Oh,
poor Nellie. That poor girl.
I'm sad.
It's not real, but I'm still sad about it.